Gil, welcome to the podcast.
Thank you so much, Luis.
So one of the reasons we wanted to get you on is our audience, when we ask them what topics they're interested in, it seems to be at the moment, everyone is interested in this idea of longevity. Everyone is talking about anti-aging and longevity. Why do you think that it's such a popular topic that people are interested in right now?
Yeah, I think that everyone wants to live forever. And actually, if I will go for myself, I started to be interested in that when I was very young. Actually, at the age of 12, a relative of mine passed away from cancer. And instead of being sad about her, I was sad about myself because I realized that I won't live forever. And then I actually started my quest to immortality. Obviously, I haven't done well yet, and I'm not sure that I can live forever. But what I'm trying to do is to allow us to live a longer, better life. So I think that everyone, sometimes in his lifespan, realizes that he's not immortal, and then he's trying to see, how can I squeeze another year? How can I live a bit longer? How can I spend another few weeks with my loved one? So I think that it's no-brainer to try to live longer, but I think that there is we need to distinguish between lifespan and health span, because you can see a lot of people that are actually, I don't know, in their 70s or 80s, that actually they are living in a nursery house. Basically, they are lying on the bed with a lot of tube connected to them, and they are still alive, but their health span is over. So I don't want to get to that situation. I want to live longer, but also have a longer health span. So I think that the most important part is not longevity, but also actually health span, to increase the health span and to allow us, when we are retired, to travel the world, to read books, to listen to good music, and have fun. So I think that that's why everyone wants to live longer.
Do you think, obviously, no one's ever going to be immortal, but do you think we could ever get to a place as humans, maybe, hundreds of years down the line, where humans, consistently, averagely live into maybe 100 years old plus?
Yeah, I think that that's definitely doable, because if you look at the 2 centuries ago, in the 1900s, the average lifespan, it's unbelievable, but it was maybe around 40. And at the end of the last century, it was, 70 to 80. So I wouldn't say that it's a far-fetched that we will average above 100. We know that the longer-lived, well-documented person lived around, 117 to 120. So definitely we can reach there. What you are asking, can the average be there, meaning that less of us will die earlier, and now we have a big pandemic of the COVID, and it's actually most likely will decrease the average lifespan, and I'm sure that we'll discuss the COVID maybe later. So I think that it's doable, but in order to do that, you need to treat yourself from very early on. So even someone in your age should start thinking about, what can I do now in order to have a longer lifespan and maybe a longer health span when I will be older? Because there are a lot of things that you can do when you are younger to get to that. And I assume that that's why people are so fascinated about that, because a lot of it is under our control.
Absolutely. So there's nature, there's nurture. A lot of people tend to just assume that everything comes down to nature. Before we address that and maybe talk about the nurture side, what DNA markers are directly correlated to longevity?
Yeah, so I think that, and I think that you spoke about it with David Sinclair in a former interview, or Dr. David Sinclair. There is a big excitement right now about what we call epigenetic clock, or Horvath's clock, which basically looking at the modification of the DNA, methylation of the DNA. And what Dr. Horvath, is a professor at UCLA, found that you can find a very nice correlation about the level of the methylation of a specific site on your genome, and actually there are millions of sites on your genome that are methylated, and that's actually control the transcription of the genes on the genome, that is correlated to your age. So if you look at a bunch of those, the smallest amount that we found is 50 something, and the highest is a few 100,000, and you try to correlate it to the age of these people, you can find a correlation that is amazing. Like you can look at the methylation of, let's say, of your genome, and it can come and give you your age in the certainty of 99.99%. So it's a really amazing tool that basically we can look at everyone, and without asking what is your age, or even without knowing you, we can come and say, hey, this person is the age of, I don't know, 25, and then it will be like very likely that we are right. So I think that that's a very exciting progress that happened in the last few years. And I know that Steve and others right now, including actually Dr. Sinclair, are working on a lot of different kind of clocks to make them a bit more interesting. One of them called a grim age, that you can actually know or predict when someone will die, which is a bit scary, but that's something that Dr. Steve Horvath is doing. We are actually trying to work on something else, and maybe we'll get to that later, but I have to say it now, is a clock that is a lifestyle responsive. Because if you look at what the Horvath clock, or what Steve Horvath developed, it's not easy to modulate it. Basically, you test once, you know that, I don't know, you are 25, but you cannot start eating more oatmeal or exercise more or lose weight. Most likely your age won't change. So we are trying to use this amazing clock and find a site on the genome that will allow us to tell you, hey, you are 25, but your Horvath clock age is 40, but don't worry. If you will exercise and eat more oatmeal and, I don't know, sleep 8 hours instead of 2 hours, in 6 months, your age will go down to 35. So this clock is not doing that yet, but we are trying to develop something like that to allow people to actually give them more motivation and also allow them to modulate this clock. Because I think that's very important in order to engage people, to give them something that they can do in order to improve it.
That's so fascinating. So would you say that when people think about longevity, everyone in the world today, everyone's fascinated with supplements, everyone wants a quick fix. But would you say that day-to-day life is the most important factor in terms of longevity?
Yeah, so there are a lot of things, but if you ask me what are the top, I would say that it's very important to sleep well. Sleep is, I don't think that is underrated anymore, because everyone understands that sleep is important, but not everyone taking it into consideration. So sleep well is definitely very important. Exercise is super important, and some of us are not exercising enough. Some of us are exercising too much. So there is some population that need to relax and take a day off. And also what kind of exercise is good for you. So you asked me something very general, but I'm sure that you know that we are looking and trying to basically fit a plan specific for you based on what's happening inside your body. And I assume that we'll discuss it later. So exercise is very important. Some need more endurance, some need more strength, some need more what we call HIIT, or high intensity interval training. So exercise is very important. And nutrition is super, super important. So if you look at the average person, let's say average American, I live in the US, so average American in an average week consume 20 food items, okay? And most of us consume the same food item. I assume that you are in the UK. I don't think that our diet is very different. So we are consuming 20 food items. But when you look at the amount, the availability of food, of the kind of food that we have, there are around 8,000 different food items, okay? But we are consuming 20 of them. So basically we have a universe like that, and we are consuming a very small part of the universe. Mm-hmm. Now, if you look at my diet and your diet, I assume that they will be very similar. So we are, not only that, most of us consuming the same food. We consume some poultry and some dairy and some grain, and very, very similar food. But there is a lot of things around us, and some things will be very good or beneficial for you, some will be very beneficial for me. So I think that fitting the right food for you based on what's happening in your body is also a very, very important. And then we have other lifestyle intervention, like, for example, you have a lot of vitamin D, go outside, and do some meditation and so on. And supplements are important, but I would say if you cannot fix it by food or exercise, or if it's too hard, then go to supplement. But I wouldn't recommend supplement immediately.
So what we mentioned there, we mentioned sleep, we mentioned exercise and nutrition. So let's go by those one by one. If we're looking at sleep then, I think a lot of people underestimate how much sleep they need to function properly. If you were just to say, you know, generalized, how many hours of sleep consistently do you personally try to get then? Is it 7 hours? Is it 8? What are you trying to consistently get?
Yeah, so I'm a bit more complex because I'm looking at it in a higher resolution. So let's talk about the average person before, and then I'll go to myself. Okay. So for the average person, 6 to 8 hours considered to be a good amount of sleep. Believe it or not, sleeping too much is also not good. So sleeping more than 9 hours a night consistently is not so good. Definitely less than that is not good. But it's not only the amount of sleep, it's also the routine of sleep. So our body have the chronobiology. We are working in a circle of 24 hours. So you need to try as much as you can to go to sleep at the same time every night. You need to try to fit a routine. And for example, all the day is a preparation for the sleep in a way. So don't drink too much coffee unless you are insensitive to coffee before sleep. Don't drink too much alcohol. There is a lot of data that show that alcohol before sleep is not good. It's decrease the quality of the sleep. And again, we can get to that later. Try not to exercise too late. Again, I'm going to generalize. Some people, it doesn't affect them at all, but some other, you want to go to a long run, try to do it in the morning or at lunch, but don't do it 2 minutes before you fall asleep. Now, there are a lot of other things that influence the sleep. The temperature of the room, the noise, the humidity. So there are so many things that influence sleep, and actually, what I'm doing and what we are doing at the InsideTracker, my company, is we started to integrate with activity tracker, and the activity tracker gives you another layer of sleep. So you have sleep and you have the time of sleep, but then you have a few phases of the sleep. You have REM sleep, rapid eye movement, you have deep sleep, you have light sleep, and then you have awake time. So you need to try to optimize all of them, and for each of them there is a range. So that's why I said there is the low definition and there is a high definition. Hopefully I haven't confused you.
No, it's perfect answer, man. And you mentioned InsideTracker there. Do you want to just explain what that is to our audience and what you're trying to achieve with that?
Yeah, definitely. So as I said, I was always fascinated by the aging process, and that's why I actually came here to the US, to MIT. I spent 5 years at the lab of Flanagan Renter, which is one of the leading scientists that studying aging. And actually at that lab, I met David Sinclair, which was a former postdoc at the lab. And as I said, I always wanted to live longer, a better life, and but to cut long story short, I started my company a few years ago, and the idea was that we are trying to allow people to live longer, better life based on what's happening in their body. And also we were trying to build it in a way that it will allow us to use only natural and simple intervention. So I don't want to use drugs, I just want to recommend people to use a natural substance. So what we are doing, we are looking at you inside, because some people can look amazing from the outside, but actually from the inside, they are starting to look not so pretty. And they don't know that because it's very hard to know. And as of today, at least, you cannot connect a computer to your brain, and the computer will tell you, hey, you have a problem X, A1, ABC, replace that and you are good. We cannot do that. So we said, okay, let's look at the blood. And why blood? Because blood validates and calibrates everything. We have like, there are around 4,000 different blood biomarkers available today. So we said, let's look at them. And based on the blood biomarkers, let's recommend the user what food to eat, what exercise to do, what lifestyle changes to do, and also what supplement to take. And then the person can optimize himself. So it's very personalized. We are looking today at around 45 blood biomarkers. We're also looking at your genetics. So and the genetic helping us to give you the predisposition. So for example, let's assume that I have high glucose. It will be interesting for me to know whether I'm predisposed to have high glucose because of my genetics or not. Let's assume that I'm predisposed to have high glucose. Basically, I got a bad cards, meaning my starting point is high already. But if I work hard, I can take it down, okay? So that's the example of a predisposition to high glucose. But I can be lucky. I can have a glucose that is, I have low chance to be predisposed to high glucose. So then my starting point is good. But if I have a high glucose in my blood, that means that basically I'm slacker. My genetic is good, but I'm going up, so I have actually a better chance to take it down. Okay, so we are combining blood and DNA, and also activity tracker, and all of that together give us an ultra resolution of our body, and that allows us to give you a very precise recommendation. What should you do in order to allow you to optimize yourself, and hopefully allow yourself to live a longer, better life?
So for our audience listening who might be completely new to this subject, can you just explain to them in simple terms what biomarkers are and what the key biomarkers that are strongly connected to longevity are?
Oh, definitely. So a biomarker is as the name is a marker that is a bio come from your body. So it can be a biomarker is some blood biomarkers such as glucose, testosterone, hormones like cortisol. Cortisol is the stress hormone. Vitamins like vitamin D and vitamin B12, the level of iron that you have, and so on and so forth. And so that's blood biomarkers. Then you have DNA biomarkers. So it's basically, there it's a bit more complex because it started with something that called SNP, or single nucleotide polymorphism. What does it mean? It's basically you have a location in your genome that basically are a bit different between you and me, or between two people. So let's assume that in a specific area I have AA, you might have AC, okay? That's a single nucleotide polymorphism, meaning that one nucleotide is different between you and me. So that's a genetic marker. But that's not good enough. So what we are doing, and actually the scientific community doing, is combining a lot of those single nucleotide polymorphism together into a score. And the score is more simple to explain. It's basically exactly what I said before. You have high predisposition to have high glucose or low predisposition to have high glucose. And then you have what I call physiomarker. And we discussed it before. That can be the REM sleep, the deep sleep. Resting heart rate is very important. Heart rate variability is another one. So there are a lot of physiological marker that can be also a biomarker.
So if we jump back to what we were talking about, let's go back to exercise. So I think exercise is something that means something completely different to everyone. I spend a lot of time in the gym, and you see people who come in every day and it's cardio, cardio, cardio. There's other people that come in and it's heavy weights, heavy weights, heavy weights.
Yeah.
So this is something that's interesting to me because for me at the moment, if we use me as a case study here, so I go to the gym 5 to 6 times a week, and I'd say 90% of that is weight training or resistance training. So I'm just wondering, in terms of longevity, what does the science tell us is the the optimum type of exercising we should be doing, and how long for?
Yeah, that's a great question, and I'm not sure that I'm having the full answer. But so everyone might need a different exercise, and again, we know that based on looking at the biomarkers. So some biomarkers are easier to obtain, like resting heart rate. I'm not sure if you have a smartwatch or activity tracker, but the smartwatch or activity tracker have a resting heart rate. So when your resting heart rate is higher, that means that you might be in exercise too much. And maybe it's a good time for you to take a break, or to take a day off, or do yoga, or do some mindfulness. When your resting heart rate is lower, maybe it's a good day for you to exercise even harder. There is another great biomarker for that called heart rate variability, or HRV, and that's actually going in the different direction. When it's higher, it's actually better. So that's a physiological marker. Now, if you look at blood, there are a lot of markers that related to athletic activity. So there is a marker that's called creatine kinase. It's actually a protein that located in the muscle. And when you exercise a lot, this protein leaks into the bloodstream, and then it's actually concentrated in the bloodstream, and actually signal that you are breaking muscle. And as you told me, you're spending 6 days in the gym to lift weight, you want to build muscle. So it's not good that you have a lot of creatine kinase. So when you have high creatine kinase in your bloodstream, that suggests that maybe you work too much and you rupture your muscle tone, and maybe you should take a day off. Other markers that are very important for that are actually testosterone, which is a sex hormone, very important for males to reproduce, but also important actually for females. And cortisol, which is the stress hormone. So the ratio between testosterone to cortisol is very important. Why? Because testosterone is a hormone that builds muscle, and cortisol is an hormone that breaks muscle. So if the ratio is not good, that means that you are actually breaking muscle. So even if you continue to, let's assume that you will lift weight every day for a month, most likely the ratio will go down, and then even so that you are lifting weight a lot, you are actually breaking muscle. So knowing this ratio and basically working based on that, it's very, very important. Another marker that's important for that is the marker for inflammation. So when you exercise a lot, you temporarily increase inflammation. And again, inflammation is not good for the body. So you need to monitor that. If you have only temporary inflammation, is okay. But if you have a systemic inflammation, it's not good, and you need to find the reason for that. Marker that is very important for athletic active population, especially runners and young women, is all the markers related to iron. Because when you run, you tend to bleed from your gut and lose some blood, and then your iron will go down. But also young women actually have the cycle, so they're losing blood. And a lot of the young women have lower level of iron, which they don't know about it. And that can be very bad, not only for the performance, but the athletic performance, but also general performance, because the iron transfers the oxygen from your lung to the muscle and the brain. And when you have a low level of iron, you have a better chance to basically to perform worse at work or at school. So it's very important to have the right level of iron in your body.
So if we're talking about diet now, what would you say are the must-have staples in our diet, the things we must be including, and the things that would be terrible to neglect?
Yeah, so again, I'm a big believer in personalization, so I can tell you something that is more general. Yeah. So I think that first you need to eat a balanced diet. So maybe I'll start with what you shouldn't eat, okay? Yeah. So try to eat as less as possible from takeout or from restaurant. Try to eat as natural food as you can at home, okay? Second, try to eat, not to eat food that come in a package. So no potato chips, no something that will come in a can. Try to eat more fruit and vegetable and even meat. Eat it meat that you cook and not meat that come pre-cooked.
Yeah.
So those are definitely two no's that if you just do that, you will improve significantly.
Mm.
Then there are a few kind of foods that are very important to eat. One of them that we recommend to a lot of InsideTracker users is oatmeal. And oatmeal is basically a grain that very high in fiber that allow you to first absorb the high amount of fiber that allow you to modulate the level of very important markers that related to metabolism, such as cholesterol and glucose. So that's definitely a very important food that I'm trying to eat every day, if I can. Beans are also very good because of that. They have a lot of fiber. So another one that I think that are very important that I'm not following too much. Try to eat fish as much as you, not as much as you can, but at least twice a week, because you have all the omegas and they are almost the only food that have substantial amount of vitamin D. So that's also very important, in my opinion, to eat at least twice a week. And also, it's not easy to do that. Another regime that I'm doing that I'm sure, again, that you heard from David Sinclair is what we call intermittent fasting. Yep. So that's not what to eat, but when to eat. So I'm trying to fast my body for, let's say, 16 to 18 hours a day, and only have a shorter window of feeding. There is a lot of data for model organisms that show that it's beneficial, obviously, for longevity, but also beneficial for metabolism and also beneficial for your weight or BMI. And a lot of the markers that I discussed before, metabolic marker, glucose, cholesterol, which are super important. So those are a few examples of intervention that you can do that can help you significantly to improve your welfare.
Fasting is something I definitely want to talk about. But before we get there, something I really want your opinion on is in the nutrition world, there's this massive debate going on at the moment. There seems to be some momentum behind the carnivore diet. And every health expert I've spoken to on this show, they always say that carnivore diet is a bad idea, and you know the better approach is to stick to plant-based diets. So you know the audience would hate me if I didn't ask you, what is your opinion on this red meat only, strictly red meat carnivore diet that people like Dr. Sean Baker or Joe Rogan seem to be talking about so much?
Yeah, so I would say the following. I think that it might be a good fit for some people, but it's definitely, as you said, I don't think that it's a good fit for most of us. And why I'm saying that it's a good fit for some people. If you don't have a high cholesterol, or if you don't have a cardiovascular issues, I don't think that it might be very bad for you. So you can do that. But if you are not monitoring your biomarker and you're following this diet, there is a better chance that you will suffer later in life. So I'm saying if you are doing those diets or those experiments, paleo diet and red meat diet and other, you need to monitor yourself and be sure that you are not making a lot of harm to your body. And the same for the other direction, for example. If you are going vegan and you don't eat any meat or dairy, you have a high chance to have issues that you need to monitor and intervene for. You have a high chance to have low vitamin B12, which is a very important vitamin. You have a high chance to have low iron. So I think that I don't think that you can come and say this diet is good for everyone or this diet is good or bad. we need to understand your body and then to feed the best body for, diet for you. So I don't want to come and say this one is very bad and this one is very good. This one is very good for one person. This one might be very good for another person. And the idea is let's feed the best diet for you.
Mm. We seem to have sparked a bit of a debate on this show because we did speak to Sean Baker, but we also spoke to people like Dr. Michael Greger and Dr. Will Bolshevitz, who are really passionate about plant-based diets. And they talk about the dangers of red meat. They'd say that they're highly carcinogenic. There's links between, you know, eating a vast amount of red meat and cancer. Do you think there's any truth in that?
I think that there is a truth that if you look at the peer-reviewed scientific publication and you look at the data about vegan or a veggie diet, you can see a lot of benefit for that. So definitely there is a lot of benefit of that, and also definitely the Mediterranean diet. But again, those study was done on a specific population. Those studies are not studies that are a good fit for an N of 1 experiment. So again, in general, I agree with them that if you want to choose diet and you don't want to get into all the details around it and say, okay, I'm choosing one diet and I want to be vegan for now, vegan is much better than going and becoming a carnivore and eating red meat for breakfast, lunch, and dinner. I completely agree with that. But if you really want to go and eat red meat for a breakfast, lunch, and dinner, I would strongly suggest that you will monitor yourself, you will try to see if you get harm, and there are a lot of markers that show that.
One thing I really wanted to go back to was you mentioned intermittent fasting. I'm really bad when it comes to this. If I wake up in the morning and I'm hungry, I'll eat. If I'm, going to bed and I'm hungry, I'll eat. I don't seem to be able to fit it in. But you say that, people try and it's optimum to try and get eating into an 8-hour window. Why is that the case? What health benefits directly come from, eating in that 8-hour window and then having a prolonged fasting period then?
Yeah. There are a few. I'll start with maybe more the high level. So our body is a machine, and the machine have like a tube that get all the food from the top to the bottom, and then it go out. And this tube is working all the time. So it's like a machine that's working all the time. So the machine needs some rest time. It cannot work all the time. A machine that's working all the time get broken earlier. But if you look at more like a scientific view of that, you can see that intermittent fasting get a lot of benefit for the human being. So we have seen data from the literature that people that stay on intermittent fasting, even without monitoring the amount of calories, they tend to lose weight. Okay, so it's a good way to lose weight. It's also pretty easy because you don't need to count calories, and you just come and say, basically you have 2 points that you need to do something. I'm starting to eat now, and I'm stopping to eat now, and that's it. You don't need to say, oh, I will eat more that and less than that. There are 8,000 different food items. It's very hard to change diet and calculate it. That's pretty simple intervention. I will start eating at 11 and stop eating at 7 p.m. And that's it. So that's one. The second is that there are a lot of biomarkers, especially blood biomarkers, cholesterol and glucose, and also inflammation markers, but also blood pressure that have been shown to significantly improve following intermittent fasting. Okay? Now, related to longevity, we don't have enough data to come and say that in human, when you do intermittent fasting, you live longer. Because we live, as we discussed before, 80 years, the experiment will be long, and the people are doing it, but it might take some time to have enough data. But there is a lot of data, and David Sinclair actually is one of the pioneers in that show that doing intermittent fasting or a caloric restriction in model organism showed to significantly improve the lifespan of the animal. And he showed it in mice and rats, and they showed it in worms and yeast and fish, and even in monkeys. There is a data that show that intermittent fasting can increase the longevity. So I think that if you think about it seriously, that's one of maybe the only lifestyle intervention that we have that have been shown to increase lifespan in so many model organisms.
So if we talk about more prolonged fasting, then I heard, we mentioned him, Dr. David Sinclair. I heard him on a podcast just the other week talking about fasting for 1 to 4 days sometimes. And he's talking about how that can switch on these defenses in the body and almost act like a bit of a reboot system for the body. Is that true? And how do you feel about prolonged periods of fasting and what they can do for the body?
Yeah, I think that it's prolonged fasting is not bad if you monitor yourself. Okay, I'm a Jewish, and actually a couple of days ago it was Yom Kippur, and I fasted for 25 hours, and actually I felt great, and I think that it's good for your body to clean the body. I think that 4 days every month, it's not bad if you can obtain it. I don't think that everyone can do that. It's not easy, and definitely don't make a very important decision when you are after 4 days or at the last hour of the 4-day fasting. Your brain is compromised, your muscle are compromised. Don't run marathon when you do that. If you are an athlete, don't do that. It's not good for you, especially someone like you that lift weight. It's good for the average person that want to do it once, I don't know, a month and clean his body. It's okay, but again, you need to monitor yourself and don't get to a situation that you will go to the ER. So if it's too much for you, just stop and drink and eat and continue with your... But I don't think that it's bad. I agree with David Sinclair. It's not bad if you can obtain it.
Mm. So I know my co-host on this show has tried a 4-day fast before. I've never tried it, but I'm wondering if, say, I was to try 4 days, how could I make sure I was doing it safely? What are the things I could monitor and look out for to know that whether it was time to stop or if it was becoming dangerous?
Yeah, so you can measure your resting heart rate, which is pretty easy to do, and maybe the heart rate variability. Blood pressure is another one that it's not hard to do. But you can also look at some biomarker and see what's happening in your body, but that will be hard. So I think that it's more like a self-reported measure that you feel like, if you feel like that you are going to faint, don't stop it, or if you feel that you cannot do anything but just dreaming about the next meal. So nothing will happen. It's not, I don't think that it's good to push it just to say that you fasted for 4 days. I never done it. I'm actually was thinking of doing it, but I never had a chance to do it. Maybe I'm too busy to do it because I have too many meetings and too many calls and too many things to do. But again, I don't think that it's bad if you can obtain it.
Something I think it would be ignorant of me to ignore, given the current situation in the world right now. We mentioned COVID-19 earlier. And at the moment, I see on podcasts, books, TV interviews, everyone's talking about boosting the immune system. So what would you say are the absolute must-do habits or hacks to optimize our immune system?
So first, sleep well. Sleep is so important, and as we said before, it's underrated. Second, there is a lot of data recently about, especially about COVID and vitamin D. And I'm sure that you heard about vitamin D a lot of time, but vitamin D is a very important vitamin, mainly for, together with calcium, to build muscle, to build the bones. But vitamin D is also involved in a lot of other processes in the body. And one of them, which is not completely clear, is how it's doing it, is boosting the immune system, and also maybe from the data from the literature recently, during the COVID infection, you get like a cytokine attack, and your internal cytokine are going crazy and going exploding. And somehow people with a higher level of vitamin D behave better than people that have a lower level of vitamin D. So I think that monitoring the level of vitamin D and having sufficient amount of vitamin D is very important. From our database, we see that around half of the population, at least in the US, have low vitamin D. So that's something very important to measure. And then if you are low, supplement with vitamin D and try to get to the right level. Another one is vitamin C, which is, again, is antioxidant and a very important player. But measuring inflammation is super important. So looking at markers such as CRP, C-reactive protein, or white blood cells, and all the ingredient of white blood cells like lymphocyte and the eosinophil and other are very important because those are actually a part of our immune system, and they are helping us to fight this virus. And at least until we will have a vaccine, this is our best protection. So basically, if you ask me what should I do or what I'm doing, every time that I'm outside, put the mask on, keep the 2-meter distance in England, correct, or 6 feet in the US, and try to optimize yourself. So sleep well, exercise, be sure that your vitamin D is in the right level, the vitamin C that you're consuming enough, and try to be positive and have a good mood.
So we mentioned the vitamin D and C. Is there any difference in me taking a supplement for those or getting them through a natural way?
Yeah, so vitamin C you can definitely get from some fruit and other sources. Vitamin D, it's pretty hard to get it from natural sources. The main source is a significant amount of source is fatty fish. And also there are some kind of mushrooms that, especially when they are exposed to UV light, they have a higher level of vitamin D. It's very hard to find those mushrooms. And I can tell you that when I started the companies, I don't know, 10 years ago, I was trying, obviously I got tested and I realized that my vitamin D is low. So I started to eat fish, and I ate fish for breakfast, lunch, and dinner for almost a month. You can imagine the smell in my kitchen. And then after a month, I tested, and my vitamin D haven't moved at all. So I moved into a supplement, and supplement helped me. So what I'm trying to say here that sometimes food is not enough, and vitamin D is a good example for that. I think that, and I will encourage you to try to get it from fish, but there is a good chance that it won't be enough. So in that case, I will go for a supplement. For vitamin C, I think that eating fruits and vegetables should give you a sufficient amount of vitamin C, but I don't think that it's too bad to take also a supplement because it's a water-soluble vitamin that if you have over, it will just wash by the urine, so it's not a big problem.
I just have 1 or 2 questions left. The first one would be, and I imagine you would recommend David Sinclair's Lifespan in this, but are there any books that you could recommend our audience go and check out, read, and start to learn from, because our audience are avid readers?
Yeah, so first I have to say and confess that I'm mainly reading scientific papers and less books, but definitely, actually I have it here. I love David Sinclair book, and I really recommend it. I think that he wrote a very good book, and it's a pioneering book about the aging process and actually how can we fight it, and I read it in a lot of joy. I'm actually very interested in, because I'm a founder of a company and building a consumer-oriented tool, I really like and very fascinated about user engagement, behavioral changes, and all of that. So forgive me, but that this book is not from the aging field. So there is a very good book that's called Hooked by Nir Eyal about how to build habit-forming products. I don't know if you read this book.
Yeah, we've actually interviewed Nir Eyal on this podcast. Yeah.
So I think that's a great book. It's very simple and explain to you how can you maybe the art of engaging user. And I think that a lot of time this engagement go to the bad direction, like what Facebook and Instagram and other social media are doing. They're basically trying you to look at the next person, but actually in health and performance, we are not using those tools, and then people are not excited to come to our app and are going to Facebook. So we will implement all of that and give you a reward when you do something and allow you to enjoy what you are doing and look forward to the graph of how your resting heart rate changed today and what can you do and how your score is changing. All of that, I think that will make us as big impact maybe as what the book of David Sinclair is saying, because it will allow us to take the population that is less educated and less motivated to do that and allow them to enjoy what we are doing because we are a bit more motivated, more educated. So I really like this book, and actually after reading it, I bought it for all of my product team, and I told them, you have to read it and let's implement it. So that's a nice book that I've read recently.
Amazing. Yeah, Nir Eyal is a good friend of our podcast, so great book. I recommend that one as well. For everyone listening now, where can they find out more about yourself and your company? Can they find you online?
Yeah, definitely. So the company website is InsideTracker.com. They can also find me there. They can also find me at LinkedIn or Twitter or other places. We will be more than happy for your audience to try InsideTracker and let us know how is it going.
Amazing. InsideTracker.com. Everyone go and check it out. Gil, thank you so much for coming on the podcast. I really enjoyed this conversation and I hope to speak to you again soon, sir.
Thank you so much. It was a pleasure.
Thank you.
And I'm really admire that in a young age you are already looking forward. So I think that's it's great to have people like you that thinking about the future. When at your age I felt like I'm invisible, I can do everything. And you are forward thinking. So I really appreciate it and acknowledge that.